They say it's best to not film with a lot of light behind you, but I'm at the library for this next segment. It is December the 9th, um, 2025. And where did I leave off? I think I was just starting to get into high school, but I wanted to backtrack and just say that another kind of formative experience in my life was what they called social dancing. We did when we were in junior high, and we would have dances, and a guy named, oh, I can't remember what his name was, ran it. And the guys would sit on one side and the girls would sit on the other side. And then we'd have to dance. And they taught us how to do the box step. And of course, back then we would have some fast dancing. And the dance crazes at the time were like the frug and just like bopping. It was really, really silly. And I was super shy around girls, just super shy. I don't know why, but very nervous around girls. Um, I hung out with people who were cool, so I was kind of cool, but I was just very nervous. I was everybody's friend. The joke in through junior high and into high school was, like a girl would come up to me and I'd be all nervous, and I'd be like, oh, she's coming over towards me. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And she'd come over and she'd go, listen, can I ask you something? And I go, yeah. Does Dan like me? And so I was always a friend to girls. I was never the guy. I was always the kind of second in line. I also joked that in high school I would just walk around with Gary Sinise and Tommy Boy and just kind of wait in their wake for the girls who were pursuing them, who would fall to the wayside, and then, kind of look in my direction. Although I wouldn't have known what to do with it if they actually did look in my direction. Um, I was thinking the other day as I was making this, how much do I talk about sex in this history of my life? I mean, because I kind of view some of those experiences being not just sexual experiences, but being kind of life influencing experiences. And I know that kids probably don't want to hear, even at your age or whenever you may listen to this, what their parents' sexual pathway was. But, I think I'm probably going to have to share a little bit. I won't go into detail, but so social dancing was just a huge thing at junior high. And then I talked about Mississippi Melody, and I really began to make a lot of friendships because, in grammar school, you meet a certain amount of people, then you get to junior high and you're getting people coming from other places. So that's where I met a lot of friends who remain friends with me to this day. And it's interesting when I have the reunions, end up hanging out with the people from grammar school a lot, even though maybe going into high school, they weren't really my good friends, or then with junior high and kind of the same thing, but you have this longer history, so the bond seems a little greater. So anyway, Highland Park High School was a big high school. I don't remember how many students were there when I was a student there, but I'm going to say probably in the neighborhood of about 2,500 to 3,000 students at my high school. So it was a pretty big high school. And when you go in there as a freshman and you're at this big kind of overwhelming place and things are changing, um, it it was, made you kind of nervous. Oh, was it junior high? It had to be junior high. I was the first person, I want to say junior high, it might have been freshman year, but I got bullied a little bit. And why? Because I was the first guy to wear bell bottom pants. And I had some kind of funky bell bottom pants that I would wear. And they called me, now this is circa like 19, 68, 69, 70. They called me femboy, femora, uh, and they would like throw me at lockers and shit like that because I was kind of emulating maybe Jim and Peg, who were older and in high school and into college, who were part of kind of the hippie movement, if you will. So um, there were real hippies, like people who literally lived off the land, were dropped out of society, dropped off the grid. And then there were a lot of like college hippies, people who would go to Big Ten schools like the University of Iowa, the University of Michigan, the University of Illinois, who were very aware of what was going on with the war in Vietnam and the counterculture, et cetera. But they were like real hippies. But starting in junior high, I started to go to California every year. And I would hang out initially in Palo Alto because that's where Warren and Betty had their house, and Rob, my cousin Rob, and Jan. And I would go there. And then eventually they started to build their house up in Mendocino, where you all have been. And I was there when they broke ground on that house. I helped a little bit, mostly just got abused by Warren. He was one hard man. I was scared shitless of him. You did something wrong or you stepped out of line and he was in your freaking face. And my dad, by opposite, was just such a chill person. It's really an interesting relationship, and I know I talked about it at some point earlier, the relationship between my mom and Betty and how they looked out for each other throughout their lives. Warren, though, was the antithesis of my dad. My dad was totally mellow, and Warren was rough. But I would go out there every summer, and I would spend time at first at the house in Palo Alto and then up in Mendocino camping out. They were the ones who introduced me to camping and doing things. I remember early on, they would all go skinny dipping because they definitely were on the fringes of hippiness. Warren was a genius. He was an engineer and he was an eccentric genius, a New York Jew, and he did things. He had things the way he wanted to do them, and I would go hang out with that family, and they were much different than what I had in Highland Park with my mom and dad, who were pretty much more traditional and straight, very progressive minded, I think, but definitely straight. But Betty and Warren, they were definitely on the edge of the counterculture. They had traditional lives, but people lived on their land, and hippies lived on their land, and they had all these artistic friends that I would be surrounded by, and so it was new to me. And I remember they took me skinny dipping, and I was so nervous to do it. And there was Betty taking her clothes off, and Rob and Jan taking her clothes off. I remember, I'm sorry, I'm going to ramble. Jan looked like a boy into her early teens, and she would always walk around without her shirt on. Now, you wouldn't know she was a girl, but I knew she was a girl, and I would be so embarrassed because she just didn't care. They were really free and easy and open spirits, and you might have gotten a little of that when you visited when you were growing up. But Betty, I probably said this, but probably the most wonderful, good-hearted person I've ever met. She just was such a sweet person, and it's a shame because she was she was definitely abused by Warren. I don't know physically, but he would yell and scream. I mean, he did it to me, but he would definitely do it to Betty, and Betty would just weather the storm. That's why my mom, Nana, never really liked Warren. I never really wanted to go there because he was could be pretty cantankerous. The other side of him was he had a really good heart and people were drawn to him. But in the intimacy of work and other things, he had an opinion. And if you didn't follow that in no uncertain terms, he let you know that. But being around the influence of Betty and seeing the way people just adored Betty. And Rob and Jan are a little bit younger than me, but the influence on my life that they had growing up was immense and certainly shaped who I am as a human being today. There is no question about it. And we used to drive up to Mendocino for a while when they had homes in Palo Alto, and we'd go up to Mendocino. We'd drive up there. We'd go camping along the way. First time I ever went to Crater Lake was with them, Oregon Caves. So my initial experiences into that were through them. And, that became an important part of my life and something I, probably passed on to you guys to some extent. Obviously, it's bigger in other people's lives who grew up around it. But, I feel really happy that you all have had the experience of hanging outdoors and doing things outdoors and backpacking and hiking and those things and understanding how important that is. And probably in your lives, none of that would ever have happened had I not had the experiences I had going out to California and spending time with Betty and Warren. So I'm going to end this video because I like to keep them right around this time. That way you can kind of watch them as you want. And I think I may just continue on in the next video and right where I'm at. So, bye.